already done so, please like, please subscribe, make sure that you follow Northern Vibe for the excellent interviews that we have. And tonight is a real good one. As you well know, there are these amazing people who live among us, people whose capacity to give, capacity to achieve, well outweighs the amount of money that they're paid and well outweighs their social status. I love the Among Us series, and tonight I've got a particularly good one. Karen Jackson is one of those amazingly talented people. She's a multi-award-winning short film director. She's a content creator. She's an international multi-award-winning short film director. She's a producer. She hails from Cairns. She's the ARC Disability Services Creative Arts Coordinator. She's the Screen Advisory, she's the Screen Advisory Committee member for Queensland, and she's a former recreational program coordinator on Cape York. Pretty impressive resume, if I do make the observations. Now, we had a great chat, and it just started off about her and what she did, but it really went very, very, very deep into what makes a narrative. So if you're particularly interested in storytelling, regardless of what form it is, be it writing, be it filmmaking, be it poetry, be it whatever it is, you're going to really, really like this. And the best thing is we prove that Santa Claus exists. So for no other reason, you want to watch this video for that. Goes for an hour tonight, but stay with this one to the end. Please make sure you like, you share, tell your friends. And without further ado, here is the excellent Karen Jackson. Oops. What? Writer, you're a director, you're an inclusive content creator, you're a producer, a disability support worker, and you've had like a really interesting personal history. But the most, well, it's not really correct to say the most, but the thing that I find fascinating is that you're also a multi-award winning film director. And you're just kind of like a normal suburban person living with us. Tell me about that.
Yeah, so I kind of wear two hats. I work as the creative arts coordinator with ARC Disability Services and lead the Art Creative Ensemble. So this is a collective of very talented artists living with a disability who live here in Cairns, and we've spent probably 7 years here at ARC really building our skill set as creatives. And the ensemble collaborate on all aspects of the content we create. So the film you're referring to is the do's and don'ts of getting married. And I know you'll be doing a podcast with them next week. So I'll let them really flesh out, you know, their collaboration in that because they're very excited to do the podcast. But yeah, so they collaborated on all aspects of that project. We got a RADF grant here in Cairns, we shot it, and it was on the back of a short film we made a few years earlier called The Do's and Don'ts of Dating. And we shot it, we did it on a $20 budget. We did it all ourselves. I shot it, I edited it, and I'm not a filmmaker. I'm a writer and director. And it won the Audience Award at the Understory Film Festival here in Cairns. It got selected nationally for a few film festivals. So we knew we had something special. So this time we got a RADF grant, got a professional filmmaker, Glenn Saggers of Threadless Films. And yeah, we shot it in 3 days here in Cairns when the rest of the country was in lockdown, and just, you know, had incredible in-kind contribution and support from ARC Disability Services and the community as a whole. And yeah, that film has traveled the world. It's been seen by thousands of people, selected for short film festivals. It's been selected for Academy qualifying short film festivals. So that's, you know, top tier film festivals in the world, and it's won lots of awards. So you know, we couldn't be happier, and we're back in the writers' room on the next one. So that's with that hat on. And then We've also got a theatre production called Beyond the Waves. The same ensemble wrote that, and that was first showcased in Cairns in 2021. It's had a bit of a hiatus since then, just sort of re-collaborating the team, and we're about to travel that regionally and potentially interstate. We're adapting it into a book and potentially a film. So that's the art world that, you know, I support. And then I've got my own film projects that I do with my own independent screenwriter producer hat on. So yeah, I'm pretty busy.
Yeah. Well, when do you sleep? Could you tell us about the stuff that you're doing by yourself?
Yeah, so I'm a screenwriter, and I've been working, building my craft as a writer for probably about 10 years now. As a dedicated writer, I have always written. Grew up in Melbourne, and I don't know if it's an influence, but I grew up around the corner from Neighbours, and Neighbours used to film at our high school. Channel 10 Studios was next to my high school. I'd walk my dog, and there'd be Harold and the team, Guy Pearce. They'd all be in the park filming. Yeah, so I'm a screenwriter. So I imagine that was quite an influence, unconsciously. And yes, always written poetry, short stories. And then I really moved up here to Cairns and wanted to dedicate myself to being a writer. That voice inside of me started to get quite loud. So I quit a job. I used to work managing children's services up on Cape York in communities. And I just realised I couldn't have a full-on management role as well as having time and the space to give to my creative pursuit. So I took a year sabbatical and you know, self-taught myself how to write my first screenplay. And I think I'm 5 screenplays in now, and I've had two go through development with Screen Queensland support, which has been amazing. And yeah, it's a really long journey trying to get your foot in the door of the industry. Some people get lucky, well, not lucky, but they just, you know, they for whatever reason, they get that attention quickly. But, you know, particularly from the regions, you don't have access to the networking and the, you know, connecting with the industry like you do in the Sydneys and Melbournes. But in saying that, the benefit of being a writer from up here is you've got access to the most phenomenal, rich storytelling environment. We've got a new screen studio coming in here, and you know, it is actually a little bit easier to stand out from the crowd. I'm sure if I was doing this in Melbourne, it might be harder to get those development funds through the screen agencies and whatnot. So it certainly has its benefits as well. Yeah, so that's the journey.
Absolutely, and that is an incredible one. The only thing I'd respectfully chide you on is the use of the word luck. And I know what you mean. It's being more timing. It's being in the right place at the right time. But yeah, if there's a journey to get there, you know.
Oh, it's huge. And look, and I need to acknowledge that along the way, I can't tell you how many polite rejection emails I've had, like countless. You don't just get that first yes. You know, it was no's for a very long time, and then it was maybes, and then just recently the yeses started coming, and I'm still getting the no's. Like I got one last week. So, you know, and I'm, you know, Martin Scorsese getting the no's. Like there's no guarantee that even once you're established that you're going to get a yes, you know. So it's just, you got to love it, and you've got to have the resilience to just believe in yourself and keep going. And you know, something about me is doggedly pursuing this. Can't explain it. It's quite extraordinary.
Well, it's a bit of a pity that you can't explain it, because that's actually one of the most interesting things. I mean, most people have a creative urge, or an urge to do something that's creative. And of course, when we say creative, people always think something like this, and fair enough, you know, filmmaking, writing, poetry, painting, or whatever it is. But you can be truly creative in pretty much any field, really, when it comes right down to it. It's pretty, you know.
Yeah, 100%. Totally agree. Yeah.
But how do you overcome those? Because that's dead set. Well, you know, if you put your heart and soul into something and you go, you know, I think that this is it. I think this is cool. And because your identity is always linked, like, you know, people say, oh, this project is my baby. You know, what they mean is their identity, and their, you know, to a certain degree, their self-image, and you know, the need for human validation. All of these things are tied in with that. With that, like how, like, dude, seeing that polite rejection, like, you know, ouch. Like, how do you get over that?
Look, my husband calls it you going under the rock and eating worms for a few days and then coming back out. But it actually it charges
seeing that
you
polite
to come
rejection,
back,
like,
you know. And I think when you
ouch.
learn that, you know, Harry Potter got rejected 17 times, and you know, you look at other stories of incredibly successful projects and content that got up, and the amount of hoops I had to, I think, you know, even White Lotus, it's, you know, just probably the most successful TV show at the moment around the world, and got rejected everywhere. It's, you know, so I think just that self-belief, and when I say I don't know why I'm so dogged, I don't, but what I do know is that there's a very strong voice inside of me that's driving me forward on this journey. So whether that's my purpose in life, and it took me a while to get there, but when I got there, that it's a voice I can't ignore. And if I go without writing, or I go without being in that creative space of creating a story, I start to get, like, you know, jittery. So it's something that I'm just propelled to do in this life as me, and I strangely can see it into the future. I can see it being there. And, you know, like you say, you're just an ordinary person, and you know, I love that, because sometimes when I've watched the Oscars and seen them win the best screenplay or whatever it is, I just think, if that person can do it, why can't I? You know, with not necessarily the Oscar, but, you know, I've always decided, go big. You can always peg it back, you know. So, you know, yeah, I'm going for gold, and but to do that, you've got to make a lot of sacrifices. I don't have a huge social life, because Saturday mornings I'm getting up early and writing, rather than sort of staying out late Friday night, or missing out on coffees with friends, and because I've got deadlines. And, you know, if a producer's interested in my work, you don't muck around. You got to deliver, and you want to deliver to your absolute A grade, because this could be, you know, a long-term relationship, and that's what you're seeking, is finding that tribe that you feel safe with. You know, there's a reverence there for you as the writer, and in the case of my feature that's been optioned, I've been brought on board as a co-producer, so I get to sit at the creative table and help make decisions about the project beyond the screenplay. So it's a pretty amazing journey, and when you get those positive emails, it makes it all worth it.
Yeah, and now you're in the room where it happens. That's kind of like,
yeah, it is. It's you know, it feels like a really slow journey. The industry, like, sometimes I relate it to, you know, you can be out at sea on a boat, and if there's no wind, you just got to wait for the wind to pick up. And it's the same as a creative I can only speak for this industry, but, you know, it might go quiet for months, and, you know, you politely sending reminder emails, but, you know, then all of a sudden the wind picks up and there's momentum, and off you go. But in between, you just need all the patience in the world. And I think I was taught early to have quite a few projects on the go. So if one's not moving, you can put your attention to your other child, you know. Yeah, because it can get really frustrating, and you don't want to burn relationships by being that pesky person. You know, like, what's happening? Because they're getting held up, and you know, like feature film development, the average time period is 7 to 10 years.
Well, that's how long when you say that, that's like, oh my God.
It's just, and so, you know, I say to people that, you know, want to write, I'm like, pick the project that you think you're going to love in 5-10 years time, because if you're over it, you could still be with it. Like, you know, my other feature did get optioned, but then, you know, the option fell through for just particular reasons. But, you know, I've been with that project now, and I've got another producer looking at it, but I've been with that project now 9 years, and I'm just at that point where there's another producer interested in it. So we would then, you know, if he or she wanted to pick it up, we'd then probably be doing more drafts, and there'd be notes and more drafts and notes. TV moves a lot faster, but yeah, features a very slow moving beast.
Wow. And when you say options, like, I know what you mean, but could you explain what that means for the audience who may not?
Yeah. So basically you go into contract with a producer, and the producer basically owns the rights to that project. So they become the manager of your screenplay. So from there, they'd be looking to attract, you know, the talent, which is cast, crew, finance, distributors. Yeah, so they take care of the business side of things. And that's you know, going into an option agreement definitely requires a contract and a very thorough look at that contract, because you're handing over all the rights of your project to that producer. But that is an exciting thing too, a very exciting thing, because they're basically saying, we believe in this project so much, we think we could throw millions of dollars at it.
Yeah.
And,
which is no small thing. That is no.
It's not, and that's the big leap. Going, love the project. I think it's a really beautiful written thing, but we don't see that it's going to attract an audience big enough for us to, you know, take a risk and you know, seek out financial, you know, because it's a business. At the end of the day, this is a business, so they've got to see that there's going to be an audience for this product. Yeah, so I wouldn't say write it with that in mind, but certainly in the back of your mind, it's something to think about when you are creating story.
You've done the do's and don'ts. You've done that. Can you tell us about Aura? Can you tell us about Ray of Sunshine? And can you tell us about Grey Nomads and any other those other awesome, exciting projects that you've got going in the background?
Yeah, sure. So Aura, wow, that's going back a little while. That was the first film I directed. A beautiful short film written by Jane Modric, that I had the pleasure to direct. And yeah, that was that did beautifully, you know, for what we were able to do. It's hard making a short film, in that, you know, getting permission to shoot the way you want to shoot and at the locations you want to shoot. And that was something that really came up for us with Aura. You know, just if you want to shoot even a 10-second scene on the Esplanade, it can get tricky. So you've got to, we just had to figure out ways to, you know, best work with that project with the budget we had. So, you know, it did beautifully though. You know, I won a Best Director award at a film festival in Melbourne, and then it won, I think, the Wales International Best Film at that festival. So that was a lovely delight. And yeah, I just wanted to have an experience directing, because I'd never directed before. And yeah, so pretty happy with that outcome. And then the other two projects you talk of, they're my feature films that I've written. So yeah, Ray of Sunshine, set up here in Cairns. It's a dramatic comedy, and yeah, it just kind of fell out of me, that story. I mean, when I say fell out of me, that's months of thinking about it. But once I got to writing the script, I was able to just like sort of really let that flow. And Grey Nomads, my parents are Grey Nomads. They come up to Cairns every year from Melbourne, and I sit in at one of their happy hours and just thought, oh, okay, this is gold. So yeah, it just kind of grew from there.
And we've got a real growing film community and filmmaking. You know, it's very what's going on up here. I mean, there's a lot of other people who are active. Would you mind telling us, and my understanding is you're on the Far North Queensland Screen Advisory Committee, would you mind telling us about the committee and the exciting things in the film community here in the Far North?
There are so many talented people up here in this region, and that's why Screenworks, you know, has rolled out that 3-year support with initiatives. So Screenworks, for anyone who's unaware, they're a company that support regional filmmakers. So people from regions, and they've really noticed that there's such a pool of talent and some incredible filmmakers in this region telling beautiful stories. So we've got the Screen Studio going to hopefully opening in August. So that's very exciting. And there's just a lot of projects coming in, your Netflix programs and TV and film coming into the region, and they need cast and crew. So there's lots of opportunities for people that want to stay in the region. It does get tricky though, if you want, a career in this industry. Some people have to leave the region, and I totally understand that. But I've been fortunate in that the work I do with ARC Disability Services and my own creative projects has enabled me to stay here. But yeah, it's a really exciting time for Cairns. There's so much that, there's so much production coming up this way, and so much production being created locally.
And you've got a hand in helping make that happen. So, kudos to you. But one of the other things that you do is script writing, which is, something that I find fascinating. And in fact, you teach it. That's the case, isn't it?
I have been brought on to certain projects to, yes, mentor as a script writer, for sure. Yeah.
Well, would you mind?
I don't regularly teach it, but yes.
Sorry?
I don't regularly teach it, but yes, I've definitely been brought onto projects to, be script editor, or, last year I was fortunate to work with some students in the holiday program through council. So that was amazing to guide them through creating a short film and writing a script for that. So yes.
So how do you must be fulfilling nurturing that talent. So when you're walking through that with people, how do you get them excited because if someone's not inclined as you and I are towards this sort of creative stuff, how do you hook people into it?
Well, I mean, for me, the wonder of the craft of storytelling to me is as exciting as story. It goes back to the dawn of time. I mean, humans have been telling stories, and there's this, this structure and formula to telling stories that, Aristotle's written about it. Joseph Campbell's written about it. It goes into the core of our subconscious, which is the hero's journey and the steps taken. And I find that absolutely fascinating. That's a part of us right across every human across the world and right back in time. And I think that's a fascinating thing. And so I think once people sort of start to tap into that space and realize that the structure of how to write a story and the craft of writing a story has come from that really exciting place.
That's so true. I think it's deeper than that though, Karen. I think
it's so deep. It's phenomenal.
Yeah. You see, here's one of the things about considering the world purely as material kind of falls short. It's not that it's not true. I mean, we're having this conversation. There is a table in front of us. There is all these kind of things. But the way we experience the world is actually through story. I've got a really good friend who I've got a lot of them now actually, but one of my good mates was Popper, who went through a very, without going into circumstances, through a particularly nasty circumstance, and it was very, very challenging for him indeed. And one of the ways that he got through it, besides having support and all that kind of stuff, and all these things are important, he said fundamentally it came down to the story that I told myself.
His narrative. Yeah, right. Yeah.
But you you unpack that, Karen. What that means is we live in a story. It's not that we don't live in the world in the same way that the Mona Lisa's got a background. But fundamentally what we live in and what we experience is a story.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, you could apply story structure to your own personal life. You're the hero in your own journey. Yeah. And you can take any path at any given moment, scene 3 can shift in that direction or that direction. You can edit it. It's quite interesting. I mean, you could go right down a rabbit hole with this one. And And I think, you know, when I present my excitement and inspiration around that craft and the, you know, where you can go in understanding where the craft of storytelling comes from. It's not just from A to B and this is what has to happen, you know, that it's collectively a part of all of us. And, you know, I think it's exciting when people realize they're already storytellers and they've already got the craft embedded in them. It's just a matter of understanding that, you know, that there is now a formula that, you know, and go, okay, if you just move this section forward a bit, that creates act 1. And maybe think about, you know, breaking into act 2. And so, yeah, it becomes very interesting. But I think also too, when people, you know, tap into a story they want to tell, and then you facilitate them telling that story rather than saying, I think you should tell it this way. You say, well, how about think about what would happen then to this character and what's the setting, and, you know, then they start to get excited about their own story. You know, is just guiding them through their way of telling their story rather than you coming saying, I think you should tell it this way. You know, because only they can tell their story to the best ability. There's no way I can tell it better than them. So
absolutely.
Yes, I do get buzzed on watching people come up with ideas and go, oh, well, what if they did this? And I'm like, well, explore that, go for it. That sounds really interesting. Yeah.
But you think of how that can help people too, because not only is that an actual craft and a skill, as you've discussed, when it comes right down to it, Karen, that's a perception shift. It's like, hang on, if a character, so like if you're talking to, you know, any human being, but especially kids, so you're talking about a character, it's like, well, if this character thought about this thing from a different perspective and did this, how would it change the story? Oh, well, it'd change the story in this way and this way and this way, and this is the likely outcome of that. It's like, yeah. And that means that people then, that they can understand that they're in their own story and they can control their own story. And to a certain limitations, they can control
you get to create your own world with your own characters, you know.
How empowering is that when you think about it? So it's not just telling, I'm sorry to get gushy, but it's not just that you're telling cool stories. You're actually psychologically empowering people to get them to understand that this is, you know, that this is what I can do. This is, like you said, I am actually the main character in my own story. I'm not a bit part. And there are things that I can do to control that outcome.
Oh, look, it's definitely a very potentially reflective process, because you're consumed in your character's story, but then, you know, you can go away and at the end of the night you're laying in bed and think, gosh, maybe I should apply that to my own life, or you know, so, but it also brings, it requires a self-awareness from a character perspective, which, you know, because you're asking questions. Well, what's motivating your character to do that? What's the character's goal? You know, what are the obstacles in their way? Which is all that, you know, the structure of story, but it helps them, you know, become very self-aware of their character. And I guess you could say that in certain cases that would help them do that with their own lives and go, well, what's my goal? And what are the obstacles in my way? And, you know, yeah, it could be very reflective and potentially, you know, it's a lot of fun for sure, because you have to get people thinking about, you know, because you've got to emotionally hook an audience, you know, and there's certain rules to the story. Like, as I say to the people I work with, there's no rules to imagination, but there are some rules to how to tell a story. And kids are, you know, gosh, the stories they come up with are just phenomenal, you know, because there's no holds bar with them. They can just go for it.
Absolutely.
They haven't been too conditioned like us grown-ups.
Look,
the imagination and the playfulness is alive and well.
Yeah. The character arc thing is just amazing. But like, I've got to ask, do you toy with some of your characters? Like, do you toy with some of your characters? Like, do you sit? Did you get the God complex with them, and do you mess with some of them? You know what? I'm going to do this to that character. I'm going to, you know.
Well, that's a really interesting question. No, I don't do it for fun. No, not to torment, but you get very personally attached to the characters you create. They, you know, when you're in the story, it's like being in a dream. It feels real, you know, for me personally. So when you make a decision that you know you're going to hurt a character, it's actually really hard. And sometimes as I'm writing the hurt, I'm crying, you know, like it's legitimately, I'm feeling the emotional impact of the story I'm telling. Wow. You know, I had to write a scene recently where a character, it was a flashback and the character's reflecting on, you know, a very raw emotional time in their lives. And I literally had to pull away and get a tissue and wipe my face. I was bawling because it was very, it felt emotional to write it because it was pulling out things in me that are emotional. And yeah. B, I was hurting my character. So I don't toy in a way that for fun, certainly not. I have such a reverence for my characters, and you know, if I have to go to those places, I have to kind of draw breath and, you know, wow. Yeah, when I come out, you know, I kind of have to go for a long walk or something to recover because I emotionally I go there, fundamentally go there with that character. So yeah.
And that's the difference between a good writer and a great writer. Is to do that, because the temptation is to, because like I've spoken to quite a few writers now of varying levels. Says most of them have obviously, you know, I'm not going to talk to someone who's like had no success and no story, but I've only spoken to one that kind of like admitted this Desardian idea of like, yeah, I kind of like to mess with some of my characters. And it was like, oh no. It went like this, Karen. It went like this. It was like, I kind of like to mess with, torture with some of my characters. It's we're talking about non-existent. Yeah, it was so funny.
Oh no, but they are existent. You've created them. I mean, for me, they are. They do. I mean, God, sometimes, you know, when I'm in a big rewrite and there's a deadline, I'm spending more time with those characters than real people in my life. So, you know, I start to think in terms of them, and you know, you go right into the world of it. I mean, it's like you know, when I go into write at home, I say to my husband, unless you're dying, just, you know, don't interrupt. Like, don't come and ask me where the socks are, because go down so many rabbit holes in your story ideas that, you know, you could go through 20 ideas, but that 21st idea is the one that you lock onto. And if you're at number 19 and the door opens, have you seen my socks? You know, it's just like you're just yanked out. It's like being yanked from a deep sleep in a dream. You're yanked out and you've got to figure out how to get back in. And you could have missed that one gem of a story idea that was coming next. So it's definitely, it's definitely a deep dive I take when I write in that world. But, you know, I've also become disciplined to learn to do that when I've only got 1 hour, I've only got 20 minutes, and I just think I've got to quickly edit that scene and, you know, that I can quickly go in. So I've learned to do that because I've just got a very full life. So I can't sit there for an hour waiting for the creativity to come. I've got to figure out a way that I'm moving a story forward. And if I can't figure out that scene, I'll go over here and do something else instead, you know, maybe edit that scene I'd done the day before, but I'm always at the table doing the work. And then, yeah, just, you know, and it's often when you're driving in the car or going for a walk that the idea that you were trying to problem solve pops in. And, you know, I sometimes laugh and go, why couldn't you have done this yesterday when I was sitting at my computer? But anyway, I'm grateful that it's dropped in. And then I sometimes record myself and say, right, so this is the idea I have for this project, scene 5, boom. And so I've just got it safely recorded, and then I can go back to life. So
that's really cool. So you've indicated that obviously sometimes the muses just come when you're downloading stuff subconsciously, but there are times
and it can come from it. Like I steal from life, you know. You could say something that, you know, clues me into an idea for my script. You know, it could be something, oh yeah, my uncle the other day did this, and I just go, oh, maybe that's how I solved the problem in this script over here, you know, and then I'll go into that idea in my head and think, oh, that might be an interesting way of doing it. So yeah, there's a lot of stealing from life for sure.
But do you also have a ritual? So if you're on that time thing, it's like, okay, I've got an hour, I'm going to work on this for an hour. Do you have like, how do you get, because like you said, diving into that deep mind space, dude, that's, people meditate to do that. That's no small thing.
Well, I think it is a little bit like that, because you're certainly not thinking about your life in any capacity. You're just completely in story world. And interestingly, I write in cafes, so I can have loud noise and lots of activity around me, and I'm in it. But I'm looking at the world around me, but I'm in my story world. So my eyes aren't really seeing what I'm looking at. I'm thinking, looking out into the world. But yeah, I like to write in the mornings for a good session, and I try and, you know, give myself the commitment to at least 5 pages, and then I'll have a break, go for a walk, and you know, while hanging out the washing, go for a walk, whatever that is. You're still in that story world the whole time you're doing that. Like, you're thinking through, you're reviewing what you've written, you're coming up with new thoughts, you're coming up with new ideas. And then I'll try and go back to it for a couple of hours in the afternoon to review the scene I've written. Or if I feel inspired with something new that's coming after it, I'll just kick on and write the next bit. But I'll try and do an entire draft, you know, at 5 pages a day, kind of write it in the morning, review it a bit in the afternoon, edit it, and then go on to the next and the next and the next. If I don't know how to get to the next, sometimes I'll skip to page 40 from 20 and go, well, I know how to write this bit. I've just got to figure out how to get them there, because I know this is definitely going to happen up ahead in this story. But yeah, that's kind of mostly my process.
That's cool.
And that's also because mornings feel fresh, you know. I used to be a night person, but I've got a child now, so I'm not allowed to be. Well, that alarm clock called Mom goes pretty early. So.
And that's not a sock question. That's like, dude, they start
yeah.
Gotta go.
Yeah, but I dream story. You know, I dream sci-fi. I don't write much sci-fi, but I dream sci-fi. So I should write down more of it, but I'm a prolific dreamer. And sometimes I dream a whole first act of a film and I'm waking up going, what happens next? So I am immersed in story. It is just a part of me in every kind of way I am, which is really, really interesting.
Actually, it's totally spot on. I think, again, like everybody is, I think that you're just aware of the fact that you're immersed in story.
Yeah, well, I've swung the door wide open, and I'm in it. I'm in the world of story. So yeah, I live and breathe it, and I love it, you know. And I think, like you say, it's a part of everything, for sure. So, you know, I think anyone presenting in any work field, that, you know, if they're doing a presentation, if you're doing it as a story, you're going to have a much more interested audience than if you're just presenting slides on a wall, you know, because people want the story. They want to know the story of why things are happening and why people are doing what they're doing. You know, they want the background. They want to know. You know, we're curious beings, and story gives us access to that curiosity, I think.
Wow. So do you find, besides just the, you know, sitting down and getting in that, and really it's channeling the creative, like that's a big deal. Like, you know, people spend their entire lives trying to get in that zone, and, you know, other people try and do it in the religious sense, and, you know, to get into that. And I think they're all interlinked personally.
Yeah.
But you find, from what I'm hearing from that, is you find that this skill that you've developed assists in other ways. So it's not just applicable in the sense of like, well, I want to write a story. It's like, well, I want to convey this information to this person. I want to give a presentation. I want to do this. And you find that creative storytelling skill assists in that. Correct?
Oh, for me, definitely. Like, I know now that, you know, if I'm advising anyone on, you know, they've got to do a presentation, you know, I'll say, well, look, do a bit of backstory about yourself first, and what's brought you, what inspires you to be standing in front of these people. And you'll then have that emotional connection with your audience. And that's what story is. It's the emotional connection with audience, rather than just, I'm here to talk about blah, blah, blah. You know, you want and you want to show your passion for it too. So if you're showing your passion, that immediately gives people permission to share their passion and their excitement in that space too, rather than just be talked to about a certain subject matter. So yeah, for sure.
That infectious enthusiasm so much. And like, I know that you're on the hop for some of this, and I promise you I'll let it out like any of the stuff, but like, that actually raises a question of the nature of reality. And what I mean by that, Karen, is this. I was having this discussion the other day with a vehement materialist, scientific atheist friend of mine. And we were talking along about the nature of reality. And he said, well, it's like saying Santa Claus, it's like saying Santa Claus exists. And I said, of course Santa Claus exists. It's like head slapping. I go, what do you mean by he doesn't exist? He goes, well, Santa Claus doesn't exist. I said, so you've never seen a person dressed in Santa Claus? He said, but that's not Santa Claus. I said, I know that that's like John Smith pretending to be Santa Claus, but at what level are we existing? I said, there's a story of Santa Claus. We tell a story of Santa Claus.
Yeah, that's fascinating.
We've got the concept of Santa Claus. We've got this, you can't say Santa Claus doesn't exist. Really, Santa Claus exists. And as a historical figure, probably, like, well, almost certainly actually, Saint Nicholas. But, I'm not suggesting that there's a mythical figure that flies around in a sleigh at night that gives presents to people. That's not my argument. I'm not arguing that.
Yeah,
Santa Claus doesn't exist is just wrong.
Yeah.
But clearly Santa Claus does exist.
Yeah.
I could manifest Santa Claus if I wanted to.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Yeah, that's an interesting argument. I mean, you look at the dreamscape, as far as you're living that, and then you wake up. But when you're in it, it's as real as real life. So it's like, well, which one's real?
Exactly. And that's what you were talking about before. Like when you are, I won't say torturing. When you were, when that character, when you were dispatching or whatever it is, a character was going through suffering, that you empathized with that. Yeah. It's the same thing. You're manifesting that. So that character exists. You know what I mean? But you can't.
And
that
the visual world I'm in of the story exists when I'm in it. That's why it's that, babe, have you seen my socks scenario? It can be really tricky because I'm so emotionally and visually and I'm feeling the story. It's a physical experience of feeling the story that I'm in.
Wow.
So I'm not just typing words on a page. So
no.
What's the word for that when you're really feeling into the experience? It's ethereal. Yeah.
Yeah. No, I know what you mean. And normally, like, I try and be articulate. Yeah. But to be in
all my senses are engaged in that story.
Yeah. To be in the moment.
It's as real to me, and then I'm kind of pulled out. And I know that, when I've written a scene that I know I've just nailed and, it feels, I wake up and I feel like I've just rafted a river. Like I wake up, I come out of I pull back from the computer in the scene and I'm so full of life and excitement that, it's like I'm buzzing, like I've just rafted a river. So it's a real thrill for me when I know, and sometimes, it's not my thoughts, it drops in and my fingers are just got to keep up. And that's, so many artists talk about the muse coming, and I totally relate to that. It's just, if you got yourself there and you're in the moment and you're in the world of it, the ideas can drop through, it feels like, and you're just, I heard someone say you start by moving your characters around the room, but then the characters end up moving themselves around the room, so there's quite a lot of research and discussion on that side of the muse popping in. It's very interesting, and I can tell you by looking at a script, I'm like, that part I consciously wrote, that part I don't feel responsible for, it came through, and then I had to figure out how to weave it all in together. So it's a beautiful
channeling. What are you channeling when you do that?
Well, that's the big question, isn't it? I don't know.
But what do you think? You must have an intuition. You must have a feeling.
Story world out there in the ether. I don't know. Sometimes I feel like my story's already written. I've just got to find my way there, and it feels like a big jigsaw puzzle above me that I've just got to put all the pieces in place. So I don't actually know. I can't tell you where it comes from, but I can tell you it's coming from somewhere that just I don't know, you're in the zone. You know, you're in the zone. So it's just the gods of story. I don't know. It's the mystery of life, is that, you know, what is that? And so many, and it's not just creatives. I think so many people talk about it. You know, you could be writing your doctorate, or you could be writing, you know, a scientific paper on birds in Arnhem Land, Arnhem Land, and the information, there's such clarity in the information coming through. It just feels like you know, you're kind of you're just in that zone. Yeah,
I mean, that is but I love what that implies, me personally. That's what I find.
And I think that's what, you know, that structure of story, hero's journey, and that's why it's been studied across, you know, time. It's because when you experience that and when you understand that, you know, it's like you can't unsee it. Once you're in the door, you can't turn back.
No, you can't.
And I wouldn't want to. I love being in story world. It's amazing.
Which leads to my next question. What do you like better, the story world or this, or what we live in? Like,
all of it. It's all blended for me. I love all of it.
Oh, there's no binary. We'll see. That's it. So if you're not buying, like, if it's not like one or the other, it's like, yeah, it's the same.
Yeah. Oh no, you know, because this is my story, and you know, yeah,
absolutely.
Yeah, and now that I've got the, you know, it feels like I've had, you know, saved myself therapy, because I know the hero's journey, and I've just got to kind of apply it here. So no, it's all interrelated for me. There is no separation.
Look, I really love Joseph, because, you know, we're talking about the hero's journey, which is obviously, you know, most people associate with Joseph Campbell, and I absolutely love him. The only thing I really disagree with him is like, follow your bliss. It's like, really? That's what you.
Yeah, no, I'm all for follow your bliss.
Oh gosh, no, I just kind of found that, and I was like, really, Joseph? Really?
Well, you know, when you're in your happy place, you know, when you're satisfied, you know, when you're experiencing life in the way that you feel like you're meant to. That's how I, you know, express that for myself. Follow your bliss. You know, I think that's a beautiful piece of advice. You don't like it?
It's not that I don't like it. It's not complete. It's like, I think that blissful state that we're talking about, so that euphoric state, I think that's the word that we're looking for there. That euphoric, blissful state can indicate to you when you're where you should be and doing something that you should be doing.
Yeah.
Picking the state. The state is an indicator. It's not the end. It's the tool of telling you. It's like, well, you know, so when you're reading a story, when you're just writing a story, you're just in that zone. Or even if you're really reading a story that you really like, or you're watching a movie that you're totally immersed in, like, it's like, yes. But that's just an indicator of, because there's an outcome, especially when you're writing, okay? So if you're writing something, like, you're heading towards something.
Yeah.
It isn't the bliss. The bliss helps you. The bliss is a tool. It's kind of like kindness.
I don't think follow your bliss doesn't also mean, and you might have to work really hard. I think it's just it's more of a signpost to say, recognize this is your bliss, now follow that. You know, it's like, what are they, you know, find something you love doing and do it every day. And
yeah.
You know, it becomes your job. That to me is what that sentence represents, follow your bliss. It doesn't mean you're just going to sit in a euphoric state for the rest of your life. It just means that you're chasing, you know what makes you happy, you know what gives you joy and satisfaction. So try and bring that into your life as much as possible, you know, and then value it when it's there. You know, when times are hard, know that you're still going to get to that space. So yeah, I think that for me, that's what he's trying to say in that sense. And I know for me, writing gives me bliss. It's, you know, and I'm trying to figure out how I can do it every day for a job.
Well, I mean, it would be inaccurate to say that you've monetized writing, but like you've one of the things I kind of like really admire about what you've done is like you've got all of these different passions and interests and you've melded them, you know what I mean? And it's and you're making a living out of it, which is a rare thing, Karen. That's a rare,
no, I mean, I know I'm fortunate in that way that I'm very clear in my goals of what I want to do, and not everyone is. And I know, you know, plenty of people I know as adults still say, I'm not quite sure I know what it is I want to be doing. And I was really clear, I wouldn't say early, you know, it sort of did come to me quite late in life that I really recognized I want to be a writer. And then I looked at how many writers there are in the world, and I thought, okay, but that's beside the point. That's what I'm hearing. So I need to follow that calling in me. And then, yeah, just step by step, just started doing that. So I'm fortunate in that I know what I want to do, and then it just started to sort of align itself to that. So
I think going back to the Joseph Campbell thing, that helps bring into resolution and coalesce a thought. It's like, I'm not disagreeing with you, and trust me when I say that I'm not seeking argument, nor am I seeking validation either. Like, I mean, that's just the nature of a conversation. Like, I don't even myself half the time. So, you know, if being in my head required constant agreement between all the different characters in my head, it's like, you know, that's just, that's simply not going to happen. But you talked about a goal. So, you know, when you're in that
hero's goal, you mean? Or
the goal isn't the bliss. The goal is the writing, and it's the bliss. Yeah, I think that's what I was thinking. That you were seeking something higher, and the bliss was an indication, I suppose, the way of articulating what's going on. Like, the bliss would be a pointer, a signpost towards like you set this goal, you're getting there.
Yeah.
When you're in that moment.
Yeah, and I think definitely. Yeah.
Well,
coming out of writing a scene and feeling like I've rafted a river, I mean, that's the bliss, you know, because I feel alive. And I think any moment we're always chasing that alive feeling in ourselves. You know, we don't want to be dormant and walking around, you know, half alive. You know, we always want to be experiencing that feeling of being alive, and definitely writing gives me that. So I think I'm on the right track. I'd like to think.
Do you have a sense of danger when you write? Like, are there places that you won't go?
Oh yeah, I mean, because like I say, you're so in the world of it. So if a character's in danger, you feel in danger. That's what I mean. It's a whole feeling experience. So I guess that's what you're talking about.
Are there places that you won't go intellectually? Like, if you're sort of like sitting there writing, it's like, oh, that's just I just
no. No, I mean, because then, and I don't think you're giving it its full authentic expression if you're going to set boundaries for where. I mean, you can edit it out later, but no, I don't think I limit where I would go. I'm drawn more to writing heartfelt stories, to say, like, you know, I won't say never, but, you know, horror, for example, isn't my necessarily my go-to. But never say never. It's just, you know, I'm more inclined to tell those dramatic, heartfelt, very funny, you know, quirky, funny stories. That's sort of my natural inclination.
So if you're writing a character that's like, here's the thing about evil. I mean, you know, if you have a one-dimensional character that's just like a villainous, mustache twirling bad guy, that character isn't compelling, because it's kind of not realistic. Like, you know, even truly bad people are motivated by what they seem as the intentions.
Right. I recently wrote a script where there was some pretty nasty people in it. But when you delve into the characters, you understand their motivations. Normally it just comes from a place of fear and insecurity and vulnerability. You know, it's not actually just, because it isn't authentic if you just write a character that's evil, but you don't at least understand in your own mind why. Even if it's not on the page, you have to do the background work to understand, well, why am I writing this character in this way? You know, So it wouldn't just be, because that's a very superficial character. And if you don't believe it, the audience won't. So, you know, you've just got to dig deeper and go, well, why are they being so cruel? You know, why are they doing acting in a certain way? Like, you've got to understand the backstory of that character. And, you know.
So how do you deal with evil, like in your characters and like, you know, when you're walking that path and you're kind of like, you know, it's like,
by understanding the motivation,
that's
and understanding that usually comes from a place of their own pain, hurt. In my case, yeah. I haven't actually written an evil character, like, you know, your Marvel kind of, I've never written anything like that. So I've certainly written characters that can act cruelly, and for me personally, with those characters, it always comes from a place of their own pain.
Gotcha. Makes
sense. Yeah. But, you know, and I know for actors say, and I know from a writing perspective too, you can't be judging the characters you're creating, because then it's not authentically coming from their point of view.
Yeah.
You know,
straw manning them. Yeah, you're straw manning them basically, and you
well,
need to feel
before you even really begin, because you've kind of narrowed them into a box, or, you know, and it doesn't give an opportunity for something spontaneous to come up as an idea for you to take that character in a new scene. And, you know, so you've got to remain really open to where that character may go next. Yeah. A lot of this I'm thinking out aloud while I'm speaking, by the way.
Well, you're supposed to, and these are the best conversations, and well, what it's worth.
Yeah. Well, what's really interesting, and I listen to a lot of screenwriting podcasts, is that there's no one screenwriter to the next that has the same process and has the same way of going about it. It's so uniquely different for everyone. And I find it, you know, when people say, what's your process? How do you go from an idea to getting it on a page? I don't actually know. Like, and it's different for every script I kind of approach, you know. And where it starts to that point when you say fade in and you start writing, it's just, you know, there's months of sitting there staring out a window or looking like you're paying attention to someone over coffee, and you're in your story world, you know. But yeah.
Oh, that's funny. So
yeah.
I know you're telling these, and again, I'm sorry to use these actions, but these really cool, wonderful, small stories. But what's the meta story? Is there a meta story that you're trying to tell?
Yeah, I think I talk about healing. I think that's kind of the theme that runs through all my stories, is about, you know, healing.
Wow. Okay.
Yeah. Don't know why. Again, it's a mystery. But, you know, it tends to be about healing. Just keeps coming up. It actually got pointed out to me, and then I started to recognize it and went, oh my gosh, that's true. It is. Most of my stories are healing.
Yeah, sometimes you need someone else to look at it and articulate it.
Oh yeah, people see things in my stories. They go, I love how you wrote that, and you know, you did this bit, and I'm like, I didn't. That's how it was interpreted. Wow. And I'm like, that wasn't purposeful at all. Did not even see that I've done that. So yeah, it's fascinating that it can be so open to interpretation.
No, I do. I understand the relativist argument that, you know, a text can be interpreted in any way, but there's a right way of interpreting a text, and there's a wrong way of interpreting the text.
Yeah, well, you know, you do have to be there's a very fine line to making sure that certain things are interpreted in the way you mean for them to be interpreted. And it sometimes can take quite a few drafts to make sure that gets there, and lots of people reading it, so you understand that what you're thinking isn't on the page quite yet in the way you want it to be, and you've got to go back, flesh that out a bit, or edit it back. And then, of course, you know, now I know that making film, so much of the story is told in the editing room, because if an actor delivers a line in two different ways, it can lean the story one way or the other. So yeah, that's very interesting.
Okay, so when you're writing, as opposed to doing something visual, how do you show, not tell? What do you do?
that's a muscle and a craft that you need to practice. And and it's a way of writing, particularly for screenplays. Obviously novels are completely different, but yeah, for me personally, I just have to picture it. And now that I've become very experienced at seeing the show Don't Tell, when I see the tell, it's very annoying because you're like, I understand now why show don't tell is such a critical aspect of telling a story. So yeah, I think I just break it down and I imagine exactly all the motions that would happen, and hope that, yeah, it's a real craft to the show don't tell. And I'm not saying I'm there yet, because every story I've got to feel like I've got to start from scratch with how to craft the story. But reading lots of scripts helps, and seeing how other people do it, watching it on screen and seeing what they show compared to what they tell, good and bad. Like, if you see something that's told way too much, it definitely takes you out of the experience as an audience. So yeah, I'm not sure I've answered that very well, but
no, very well. Like, please don't doubt yourself. And seriously,
no, it's not that. I just can't figure out how to quite answer that question. It's a tricky one. It's practice, a lot of practice, and a lot of watching how it's done well, I'd say.
Discipline and practice. So, takeaway message to people who want to write or be creative generally. What would you tell them?
I'd say, look, if that voice is inside you, and it's something that you really want to do, just do it. Absolutely do it. And even if it's just you're writing a beautiful story for yourself or to show your family, or because it's a beautiful journey to tell a story. So I'd say write it, and if you actually want to potentially have a career as a writer, I would say finish something. Absolutely finish something, because you're way ahead of the game just by having a completed script or a completed first draft of a novel or whatever it is. And yeah, learn your craft and enjoy the ride. Get used to the rejection letters, because there'll be a few. And if there is, just believe in yourself. There's a lot of people tried to talk me out of this journey along the way. Oh, you should do journalism because that pays money. And I just had to stick in my lane and believe that the steps I was taking were, felt instinctively right, were right. And, looking back, I probably could have done things a little bit differently, but, here I am. So you just take that first step. Just jump into that course, or buy that laptop, or whatever it is that's holding you back. Just write one page on a piece of paper every night, whatever it is. Just do it and enjoy it, and don't let doubt get in your way.
No, don't. It's been a common theme, really, hasn't it, from all of our guests, because I always ask people, because I know there are a lot of people out there watching who are interested in getting into that kind of stuff, and it's always the same. It's just do it. If you've come this far, thank you so much. Make sure you like, make sure you share. I've got to apologise to Karen for stuffing that up at the intro at the beginning. I'm sorry, mea culpa, mea maximum culpa. By way of explanation, I was editing right, quite close to the end there, and having to do a couple of other things. I am so sorry about that. I hope it didn't ruin what was otherwise a really good interview. I had a fantastic chat with Karen, and I enjoyed her insights so much. Got some great interviews coming up in the next few weeks. The Art Creative Ensemble, of whom Karen is the facilitator to get people to tell their stories, are coming on. I'm doing that interview this Wednesday. Really, really looking forward to that. So make sure you stay tuned, make sure you like, make sure you share, and tell all of your friends. Thank you.